Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of trade with India, the subcontinent. What does it mean when any Western government says, "Well, we're going to sign a free trade agreement with India"? What does that actually mean? Now, in Australia's case, and Canada's case, and Britain, all over, they've already got so-called free trade agreements. In fact, more than one. So there's going to be another free trade agreement to add on to, or to replace the other free trade agreement to the free trade agreement that existed before that. So this is all propaganda and glitz and lights and pomp and circumstance. What does it actually mean? Well, let's unpack this one. So what's the deal that Australia has with India? Now, India's a dirt poor fucking basket case. Their annual per capita income's less than $2,000. I mean, it's a fraction of what it is in Australia. So what's going on with, why is India a desirable? I mean, why would you want to suck up to India? Well, what's the purpose of it? If India wants to buy Australian products or so on, then nothing's stopping them. But India has a lot of tariffs at their end that obstruct and limit Australia's penetration of their markets. The markets that can be in things range from, say, coal to say seafood and various produce type things. So this is sort of something that Australia can sell their products to India, but India has got these tariffs on it which limit and prevent the sale of Australian products. So Australian trade negotiators go to India and say, okay, let's have a free trade deal. Now, the Indians, in return, the Indian government says it is mandatory. I mean, there's nothing else to talk about. It is mandatory that you must take millions of our surplus population. And we want standards lowered and lowered. If somebody's got a corrupt degree from some rural place in the middle of nowhere that says they're a quadruple PhD doctor, you have to accept that. You can't question that. You can't say, "Oh, that's bullshit. That's a corrupt." No. So standards have to be lower. Any Indian that wants to come to Australia can come. They can get citizenship. They can get residency. They can get work permits. Now, the primary source of Indian income, national income, is Indians working overseas, who've managed to go. So every Indian that goes to work in the West, gets some sort of a job, and they send money, whether it's a small or large amount, they send money back to their relatives in India. And this is a huge part of massive part of the Indian economy. Without that, India would be fucked and screwed. So it is a mandatory requirement that these Western countries must accept Indians by the shitload. Now, if there's already millions and gazillions of Indians there, then they have to, you have to accept more millions and gazillions. It's always a requirement. So I don't know what any Western country gets in return. Now, in addition to that, the Indians want the option of being able to buy up businesses in the West. This is very important to them for some reason, but they don't want to be that open in selling businesses to Westerners or Western interests. So if it's an existing Indian business, they don't really want to sell it. If you want to set up a new business, they'll consider that. But again, you've got to pay a lot of bribes and backsheesh and so on to get anything done. So the Indian market isn't really very attractive. In fact, it's not attractive at all in many ways to any certainly for manufactured goods and many services. There's no real point. So it's a bit of a one-way thing. The Indians say, well, you have to take millions of our surplus population, and that's a mandatory requirement. It's not a negotiating point. Unless you're prepared to accept that, there's nothing else to talk about as far as they're concerned. And remember, there's nearly a billion with a B, Indians gagging to get the fuck out of India and to go to the racist, wicked, fascist Nazi West. So they're coming in their shitloads and want to come. They can't get out of India quick enough. So this is the trade deal that the Australian government and other Western governments, but for the moment, the Australian government wants to do. And every time they talk about another free trade agreement, all they're doing is saying millions more Indians are going to come in. Now, Indians are pouring into Australia. Just recently, I was in a park in a outer suburban area at a park meeting some people, and this is a park I was at a few years ago where there was, everybody was white. I don't recall seeing a single brown or black person. And just in the space of a few years, this park or this area is now majority Indian. That's how quick it was. And so that also illustrates just the numbers that are pouring and how they're managing to successfully create sort of Indian-only diasporas. I would speculate in another few years there'll be no white people there; it'll be all Indians. I mean, how can this even happen? I think I've mentioned before. Recently, I went into the city, and I was for certain sections of the journey around the sort of the wider CBD. I was the only white person in the fucking train carriage. And I used to have to go. I've done a lot of international business travel. I used to have to go overseas to go to somewhere like Malaysia or Indonesia or India or I used to have to go somewhere like that if I wanted to get that much cultural enrichment. But now I can get it in downtown Sydney. An hour's train ride from where I live. Oh, fuck. Now, I don't know. I think Australia gets the short end of the deal. Australian exporters, so ones that are exporting, I don't know, seafood or something, they can get access to markets, but the amount of goods and services that Australia sells to India, and then the amount of Indians that they must accept as immigrants in return, I think Australia is getting the serious short end of the stick here. This is of no benefit to Australia. You have to accept millions upon millions of people that don't want to integrate. They want free stuff and handouts. They want their own. They effectively want self-government within Australia. And I mean, to what benefit is that? And Australian exporters, outside of some small pocket, they're not getting any benefit, but the Indians are getting a lot of benefit in return. Now, just last year, I think the Indians bought up something in the region of $40 billion worth of Australian businesses, which could be corner stores or could be, but this is Indian big money that is buying up these cash businesses. Whether it be gasoline stations, petrol stations, or again corner stores, but they're also buying in things now like medical centres, or there's a chain of places that does X-rays. The Indians bought that up, but as soon as they do that, they're not buying a business; they're buying like a portal to transport even more Indians into the West. So they buy up this chain of X-ray clinics. And all the white people are got rid of, except for a couple of token, hot young blonde chicks for the Brahmin Indian boys to ogle at and maybe fuck and all this sort of stuff. But the rest of the stuff, they're all imported from India. And so you walk in and everyone's talking in an Indian accent. Where did this happen? So they're gaming the system quite horribly. Now, when Indians arrive en masse, I remember the first tranche of Indians that were arriving in Australia. I remember that quite vividly, and they couldn't get jobs. And they just didn't have they didn't have the qualifications. Where they had degrees, the degrees were worthless. They were either fake degrees or they bribed. They had to bribe someone to get the degree, because it's more a social status thing in India rather than a rigorous education, having a degree or a PhD. So they'd come to Australia and they had no, people claiming I've got a PhD in computer science, coding and programming, and they couldn't cut a single line of code to save their lives. They'd never done it, and they were outraged that they were exposed as a fraud. But this was the first tranche. Now, I remember sort of as that began to grow, more Indians arriving, they just couldn't get jobs. They had no expertise, they had no skills, they had no qualifications. Some of them had never even had jobs in their lives. Remember, they're coming from a dirt poor basket case country where you walk over dead bodies in the street. So these people were coming and they just couldn't get jobs. So the government, Australian government and Western governments generally, sort of changed it, and they started offering jobs in the public service just to employ them. So we've got all these Indians coming in that are unemployable. And if that's the case, why do you have them? Why are you bringing them in? But then it was changed to give them jobs in the public service. There are now public service departments where there are only Indians working there. I mean, you can't tell me that's national organic. It's not. And they give piss poor service. I mean, sure, you get the odd one or two that maybe not too bad, but the idea that they're an improvement of what was before is nonsense. So then Indians are given jobs, and then they're being given jobs in the big banks, any place that has government protection, or getting cozy government contracts, or part of the globalist cabal. These people were employing Indians by the shitload, but not on a merit-based system. So and if you were supplying service to the government, they effectively demanded that you employ Indians. If you didn't, you just wouldn't get the gig. So this was something that was white. Now, Indians don't integrate. They're not coming to integrate. They're not coming to be part of Western society. In fact, far from it. They believe they're spiritually and culturally and genetically, by the way, far superior to the West. They see us as the peasants, and they see themselves as the overlords, which is a scary thought, and particularly the Brahmins. So the Indians can be 5 or 6, 7 generations Western born and still say that they're Indian, still work within the diaspora. They hang around in the same areas. They will only spend money with other Indians unless they have to spend it outside of that. If there's an Indian owns a car dealership, they'll all buy the cars from that dealership just because an Indian owns it. If there's an Indian that's an electrician, they'll all go to that electrician to and so on. And so they keep money within that, and they don't see why they should share any of it with the white people. They'll take from the white people, but that's it. And they consider themselves as, gee, I screwed a white guy today. Look how good I am. And so the Indians don't integrate and want endless handouts. And to the point now where they're so numerous in Australia that they're in effect demanding a form of self-government just for their diaspora. And they're getting very little pushback from the body politic on this, suggesting that in the next 20 years it probably will happen. So when a free trade agreement with India is just code speak for millions and millions of more parasitic Indians will be coming into the West and taking everything they can stuff in their pockets and offering pretty much nothing in return. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.